Hola! Today I want to talk a little bit more about invisible structures. It's a bit of a misnomer because these structures aren't necessarily invisible. You just have to know what to look for. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of how we use invisible structures, not just in permaculture, but in these other creative activities that I enjoy talking about, such as creative writing and community organizing. So in permaculture, in traditional permaculture, invisible structures usually means politics, legal, economics, social sectors, and lately we've been talking a lot about personal and emotional factors that need to be considered as layers of your design project. And if we don't consider these invisible structures, then they can severely impact the success of our projects and we might not understand why. But in this video, I want to go a layer deeper and talk about the invisible structures that we don't necessarily think about as often that come up in gardening and writing and community organizing. And this brings us back to the notion of design thinking. So a designer's mind solves problems. Design solves problems. That's the point of cultivating a capacity for design thinking so that you become a faster, more efficient, and hopefully more ecological problem solver. So design solves problems and design thinking prevents problems. So some key components to design thinking are inquiry and observation and relationships, learning how to build and recognize and cultivate relationships, and pattern recognition and learning how to divert the flow and embrace and reconnect wasted resources. And in each of these are layers of invisible structures that if we learn how to recognize them quickly, then we can plug them back into the design. For example, in the inquiry phase of a design process, we're looking for information and data and facts. We're looking for what do we know and what don't we know, but we also want to look at what don't we know that we don't know. So the inquiry never stops, and if we peel back a layer rather than only looking at what's obvious, then we can uncover opportunities that weren't visible from the beginning. So this notion of invisible structures, of creating an ability to recognize invisible structures, you also get the ability to make those structures now visible. And regarding relationships, the main thing that we're looking for are where are the connections and how do they create a system? And then also we're going to be looking for patterns. So patterns aren't just an herb spiral or a keyhole bed. We want to be looking for patterns in time and space and patterns that aren't as physically obvious but are still presenting, once again, opportunities and also giving us more information and more data and more facts. And so then we can go back around in the cycle more empowered to solve problems. Cultivating a quick and adept ability to recognize invisible structures without jumping to conclusions is the balance that we'd like to strike here. Just to talk about the different types of invisible structures in my three favorite things to do, gardening, writing, and community organizing, let's look at that for a moment. So what can't we see? We want to think about the past. We want to think about the future. What are hidden interests and biases? What are hidden resources that we didn't recognize? And what's the hidden potential in the situation that we're looking at? In the garden, this could be bacteria. It could be the soil community. Yes, it's visible under a microscope, but if you don't know it's there and you don't consider it, then you're not going to be tapping into its full potential. Same with water. There could be underground water reservoirs, or there could be opportunities to conserve water and push water into new areas of your landscape that didn't have water before, and that's going to open up new opportunities. Another example might be weeds hiding underground, weed seeds. There's so much underground that you can't immediately see, but if you imagine it and start looking for clues, then you can reasonably create a map in your mind of how this invisible structure might be affecting the whole system design. So if you're a writer, it's really interesting to consider invisible structures as well. If you're a writer, the invisible structure is going to be things like the backstory, or the publisher's bias, or the reader's bias, or hidden stories within us, the story behind the story that you're actually telling, the experiences that you've had, and your favorite color could be part of the invisible structure in your writing work. And it's important to think about that stuff. The outline is perhaps an invisible structure, invisible to the reader, visible to you. So look at your writing through this lens and see where that line of thought takes you. And then definitely in community organizing, there's going to be lots and lots of invisible structures. And this takes us back to those original permaculture related invisible structures, such as legal and economic and emotional and cultural relationships that we aren't aware of that are going to heavily affect our work. If nobody shows up to your permaculture event, it could have very little to do with you and everything to do with the invisible structures in your communities. Find out what those are, get in there, open your mind, and explore these ideas, and also explore the ideas of others, because that's going to be part of the intrinsic structure of your community as well. It's not just about you and what you want for everyone, right? These are the types of invisible structures that just the inquiry and observation stage is looking at. So the more that we can tune in to who's doing what and why, and how the physical and biological and emotional relationships are affecting the whole, the faster and more effectively we can solve problems. In the garden, a lot of relationships are obvious, such as the relationship between the water and the plants. If the plant is wilting, you water it, the plant perks up. But many, many relationships in the garden are not as obvious. And that's why it's really important to start to learn about the soil food web and to learn the names and functions of every bird and bug and worm and plant in your garden. And now with the writing, so just taking it back around, relationships in the writing. What's the narrator's relationship to the subject? It's not something that gets thought about often enough. Even if you're writing nonfiction, there's going to be invisible relationships that are affecting your subject. And then again, with community organizing, you tune in to the connections as they evolve. So when you're doing observation and you're looking for relationships, you're not just looking for past and existing relationships, you're looking for potential future relationships, right? But also, relationships are going to happen without you controlling them at all. If you're bringing people together in a community, they're going to create autonomous and independent relationships with each other. And there is potential within those to build and expand your project. So tune in to the world outside of yourself the whole time when you're doing community organizing work. And it can be really hard. You can feel like this tunnel vision, but it's really, really important to look out and be always thinking about these invisible structures. What don't you know? And then finally, all of this is about pattern recognition, and we learn to recognize patterns so that then we can apply them, and that helps us to work with nature rather than against it. Try to make the invisible visible so that other people can tap these resources as well. There are going to be patterns and networks and flows of resources that are unique to every community, so you don't want to make assumptions about what's going to be there. You want to learn how to recognize and tap the flow of the patterns all around you. So how do we sort out all this information now that we've collected all of this data and facts and drawn conclusions and looked for opportunities in the invisible structures around us? How do we know what to do when? Use a design process. So in all of the classes that I teach, we use the Go-Berdim design process: goals, observation, boundaries, resources, analysis, design, implementation, maintenance, and evaluation. And it's a cyclical process that helps you create a linear pattern that you can follow so that you can take all of these wild ideas and all these observations and synthesize them into a design project that solves problems for yourself and others. So for now, go back through everything that you've been learning so far and look for what you've missed. Look at your life, look at your garden, look at your writing projects, look at your community organizing projects, and what invisible structures have you not been paying enough attention to? And could that potentially give you an opportunity to solve some problems that may have been recurring or that you may not have seen? Let me know how it goes, and I'll talk to you soon.